Hi everyone, this is Professor Hall. If you have not yet looked at the video on how to write a literary argument, it is about 40 minutes long, or maybe 35 minutes long. It's a little bit longer because that's basically the basis for this course. And if you don't watch it, you kind of won't know what to do or how to write about literature. So make sure you watch that first before you watch this video. Today, in here, we're going to be talking a bit more about writing about literature. And I decided to use a sample paper from a student I had a few semesters ago, just to kind of show you what maybe not to do as well. Um, this is not a great paper. It doesn't really have the support it needs. It makes major errors in interpretation. There's some spelling and grammar problems throughout the paper. I'm also going to link it up to our website in case you just want to read the comments, which aren't going into as much depth as I am here. But one of the biggest problems is that there's no text from the literary source itself or from secondary sources. Secondary sources are things that are written about the primary source, which is the piece of literature that you're looking at. And for your first paper, I'm going to ask you to use evidence both from the text and from secondary sources, which I've provided for you. So let's get into the paper. This one is about Cathedral. And he has a claim in the Cathedral by Raymond Carver. He forgot to put that in quotations, and it's not called the Cathedral, it's just called Cathedral. So fix that part for him. In Cathedral by Raymond Carver, there are many themes throughout the story, but the most prevalent theme is that of alcohol. So this is his claim, our author here. This is highlighted by many situations throughout the story because of the alcohol. That to me, I'm going to put our problems here in red. That to me is one of our first problems. Number one, alcohol is not really a theme. Themes are abstract ideas in the text that help to develop the author's message. And alcohol it's a motif, as I talked about in a different video. It's a repeating element, and we see alcohol several times, but it's not a theme. If you wanted to say a theme of addiction, maybe, because later on here there is a lot of smoking and drinking marijuana and sorry, there is a lot of drinking and smoking marijuana. So he has that as kind of one of his reasons. This can be seen as a negative and detrimental habit. But then we see how the husband connects with the blind man after they have a few drinks and smoke marijuana together. So maybe they're both alcoholics. This is kind of confusing, and it doesn't really explain. Number one, there's the wrong there, right? You can see it underlined in blue. But it doesn't really explain. They're both alcoholics. What would that have to do with the author's message? We have two different attitudes in the story toward alcoholism and addiction, one showing how it can be bad and the other showing how it could be positive. Again, I'm not really sure how he came up with that interpretation. I do think that alcohol plays a role in the story, and you could say that alcohol leads the man to be less bigoted, possibly, or that he uses it to open up his mind a little bit instead of closing it down like he normally does. And then we have here, this is, in my mind, the author trying to convey to us most things are okay in moderation. So we have some words missing. The author is trying to convey to us. The other problem, though, is if you've read the story, I hope you have already, but if you haven't, read the story and think about it and ask, is that really the author's message? Is the overall thing that the author wants you to think and believe that alcohol is okay in moderation? I think that if you read it, you will see that's really not drinking is good in moderation is not really what the author wants you to learn from this. And there's much deeper messages here. Um, so, he likes to drink a lot. This is an everyday occurrence. This leads to a rift between him and his wife that does not take part in those activities as often as him. We see this self-destructive behavior causes problems to his personal relationships. This part I actually think is correct. I think you could say alcohol is a motif and it's causing sorry, alcohol is a motif. The husband, Bub, is using it in a self-destructive way, and it causes problems in his personal relationships. The husband drinks so much, he alienates himself from his wife and becomes isolated from her. I think that is also correct. Now, the problem here, if you looked at the other video, I talked about having a topic sentence, having evidence, having analysis, and then linking it to your next point. And in this paper, he does not have any evidence to prove his point. So, where does the husband drink so much he isolates himself from his wife? Where does he make rude remarks and treat his wife horribly? Where do we see that? The wife is upset and unhappy with her marriage. How do we know this? Now, it's not to say necessarily that these are wrong because they're not in this section at least where I put the yellow right here. I don't think he's wrong in his interpretation in those parts. I do think he's wrong in his claim, but I don't think he's wrong in his interpretation in those parts. But at the same time, there's no evidence to back that up. So I don't know where he's drinking so much. I don't know where he's alienated from his wife. I don't know what rude remarks he's making, and I don't know how the wife would be unhappy with her marriage. The next part, we have a transition. This then leads to John being invited over for dinner. At the first, the husband does not want anything to do with them and keeps them at a distance. The more they drink, the more comfortable they are around each other, etc., etc. One of the things here is that really the author of this paper, I'm going to put this in green just so you can kind of see how much. This is just summary of the story. He's just telling me, here's what happened first, then here's what happened, next, this is what happened, then this happened later, and this happened at the end. I don't need any, I don't need any summary for the story because I already have that. Now, this here, I put the comment in a couple days ago. The connection that John and the husband have after drinking and smoking would probably not have happened if they were not drinking. That's a good insight, but I don't need the rest of it with telling me what happened in the beginning and middle of the end of the story. And then again, we have a problem with interpretation. So I'm going to highlight this part in yellow. I think this was a good statement. This shows that in moderation, drinking and smoking maybe is okay when done to a point where a person is reliant on the substance to keep them interested in life. I'm not entirely sure what that means. It doesn't it shows that they have a connection while they're drinking. But does it show that it's okay to drink to a point and that you can be reliant on a substance to keep you interested in life? This part in particular, I'm not sure what that means. Usually when you're reliant on a substance, you're uninterested in life because you're reliant on that substance. So perhaps we could say instead that that Bub, the narrator, was reliant on substances, which kept him from being interested in life, and that meeting John, the blind man, kind of wakes him up out of that mental state. But I don't think that you can say that the substances are keeping him interested in life. And then we have a conclusion, which I will tell you too, this was supposed to be 4 pages, so you can see we only have not quite 2 pages here, so that was a problem as well. So keep them interested in what life. This is what the author, Raymond Carver, is trying to convey, is that when done in moderation, it is okay. Again, confusing wording, not grammatically correct, and also a repetition of what we've already heard 3 times. Even the author had a problem with alcohol in his life. He had written about alcoholism before his death, before in other stories. This is true. However, it came from the secondary sources, and we don't see that evidence. So, what other stories? Where do we know that he had problems with alcohol in his life? Where is that information coming from? You have to cite things, and if you don't, that's plagiarism. And then we have almost word for word repetition of the use of alcohol in a positive and negative manner. Um, I don't see where it's negative because he's only written about it in a positive way up here, and it's quite confusing. So when you are doing a story explication, um, you need really to think about your claim, making sure that you understand the author's message, and then finding things to support your interpretation of that message. At the end here, we have this. Even though people have addiction or problems, they can overcome them and become a better person. And this is evident as we've seen the husband change from being inconsiderate and rude in the beginning of the story to somewhat sincere and interested in others at the end of the story. To me, this sentence here really should have been this author's claim. And then he could have talked about alcohol as a motif that helped to build up this message here. So, just something to remember in your papers. And if you can, at the end of this video, you can go on to the next one, which is an example of a paper that got a little bit of a higher grade. Thanks.